Yes, everyone, you know what time it is. It's your boys Jack and Dave here. We're going to be giving our reaction to Conte's quotes that have just come out of an interview, I believe, with Matt Law of the Daily Telegraph. And it kind of has caused a bit of a stir here. At least I saw on Twitter, it definitely caused a bit of a stir. We're going to kind of bring up the quotes now, show you maybe some quick little examples of the divided opinions I think that Conte usually seems to draw here. But first, everybody, before we read these quotes, do smash that like button. Do get your comments in if you have already seen these quotes. And if you already do have a strong opinion on them, do get them down below. But here's what he had to say. For me, to celebrate fourth place and a place in the Champions League was really strange. At the end of the final game against Norwich, I called my staff and said, pay attention. Don't be used to celebrating a Champions League place. I was very clear. I said we did the maximum from ninth to fourth place with all the problems we faced was a miracle, but we didn't celebrate like it was a miracle because I am used to winning. And this is kind of sort of the stir that he did cause indeed. Cody Mack, I think it really actually having a bit more of a, I wouldn't know balanced is the right word here, but certainly a very funny quote when it kind of comes to it. He says this quote and the reaction to it perfectly encapsulates how the media were able to easily undermine Conte, which they set about doing immediately from the beginning. Spurs fans were easily manipulated in it as well. He hasn't told a single Spurs fan they shouldn't have celebrated. Yet that's the infight. This is what Simon Humane saying. I can't imagine anything less interesting than hearing Conte quotes in the year 2024. I'm so over whatever that whole time was. And Sam Cornish saying need some Ange quotes to drown out the poison from the washed Conte as soon as possible. So Dave, Conte's quotes here. I mean, he's definitely caused a stir, as he always liked to do. What did you make of them? Like, do you find them to be relatively on point, not that contentious, or did you think there's, a bit something wrong here, like some people are sort of suggesting?
Well, look, first of all, how divisive they are probably highlights why he's not at the club anymore because of the sort of controversy that he does cause.
Good
But
point.
being brutally honest, I actually don't mind the quotes, to be honest. They are quotes of a winner. That's something I would hear like Roy Keane would say and stuff like that. I absolutely have no problem with them whatsoever. I'm going to be a hypocrite here. As a fan, I absolutely loved that season. And, I did celebrate getting top four because it's all I had to cling on to come the end of the season. And it was a miracle off the back of where we were under Nuno. It looked like everything was going in the right direction and set up really nicely heading into the following season. And what he tried to create there, is that he had a feeling that the players were absolutely delighted to get top four. The feeling in around the boardroom, as we know, would be that they were delighted to get top four, and the feeling in around the fan base. But when we hired Conte, we didn't hire him just to get us top four. We hired him to be able to go and try and win trophies and end that trophy drought. So I don't mind them quotes whatsoever. He's just sort of telling, why he was here, and he wanted to sort of have that mindset going into the following season. Unfortunately, the players didn't.
I think Conte is speaking quite truthfully here, and whether you like the truth or not, I guess in Conte's eyes is going to set you off either direction. And that's sort of how he is. I think when he even was, sort of a Spurs manager, I think he always wanted to speak more openly and truthfully. And in his sort of case, like he does see things probably a bit more in a cynical kind of, kind of a more ruthless kind of manner, I feel like. And with that meant he was going to always say some hard truths when it came to Spurs, or when it came to even his own kind of mentality and his own winning mentality. And that kind of shows here, really, right? Where he's basically saying, like, what I took over, what I inherited at the time in that season, getting something like Champions League was truly the maximum of where we could finish that season. And I think for the most part, that's probably true. Maybe we could have pushed further in a cup like the Conference League or something like that. I think he didn't exactly do the best in the cup competitions, but I do remember some tough injuries at the same time as well. I remember some injuries he had to deal with, which certainly Ange Postecoglou has had to deal with in some fashion too. And Antonio Conte, for the most part, gave us a pretty memorable season. It was one of my favorite seasons, like you said as well. I even got to go to the West Ham match, where was one of those crucial points in the season where Spurs were on a bit of a, I couldn't remember exactly if we were on a run or if we were kind of falling a little bit and we just really needed a good win. It was just a game where it's like Spurs had to win it if they really took themselves seriously and sort of keep pushing for that top four place to displace Arsenal, which also made it a very fun season to displace Arsenal in the
mm,
top four. And to, yeah, do all of that. Certainly, like, I think the fans can celebrate, which I agree with Cody Mack. I don't think Conte's saying the fans, can't celebrate it.
mm,
It's just that maybe with the players, he's saying, yeah, like, we can be proud of ourselves. Like, this is
mm.
the maximum, but let's not use this as a barometer. Let's not use this as the
Yeah.
test, or like, as this is the limit for Spurs always. Like, Spurs should see
Mm,
that is, not even much of a success at all, because
mm,
that's not how Antonio Conte looks at things. He looks at
mm,
trophies and looks at material success of going on a real run and actually getting something out of it, grabbing a trophy out of
mm,
it in some sort of manner or some sort of fashion, whether it's done ugly, whether it's done in a beautiful way, he's going to get it done. And he has shown that in his past. And
mm,
it's maybe another debate whether we think he's still, tactically suited for
mm,
Spurs or something like that. I think that's maybe a different argument, because I think we all really love Ange and we love his style of play. But Conte at one stage, the way he got us to top four, that style of play was effective. It was Kulusevski's best season, I think, as a
mm,
Spurs player. He got him absolutely firing when he came into the team. Other players like Bentancur, Højbjerg really thrived under him. Harry Kane, Sonny
mm.
too. So it's, I don't know, Dave. Like, I don't really know what Conte said that's all that wrong here.
Look, to be honest with you, I think people's preconceived opinions of the way they came out of the Conte era with their opinion on him will probably, lean on where they fall on that side of the argument. But what I would say, as a Spurs fan, take away from the fact whether you like them or not, whether you thought he was whether you think he's a good manager or not. The reality is he's not the only one that has said quotes similar in that fashion. Pochettino has, who we absolutely used to adore before he took the Chelsea job. Jose Mourinho has, and I can guarantee you at the end of the season, Ange Postecoglou will make similar quotes as well to try and push this team on to win trophies. The difference is he'll do it in a different manner, and he's got the fan base behind him, so there won't be that sort of split sort of reaction to it, because the way he will say it, absolutely everyone will be behind him, behind Ange, and say, yes, 100%, let's push on. So let's not pretend that Conte is saying anything out of the ordinary here. He's not. And at the end of the day, as a fan, what do we all want and what do we all get criticised for? Never getting over the line to win trophies. So a manager saying that his aspirations are higher than finishing top four, which is where fans are at, I'd say the majority of the fan base are at today, I don't see the problem with it whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's basically,
All it is the guy that said it and the manner that it was said in.
I think it's more also a message just to the players and people within the club. I don't even know if it's that much of a message to the fan
Mm,
base or anything like that. It could be, and that would be seen a bit differently. But I feel like the fact that he's sort of just reiterating that to his coaching staff, to the players, that next season, like, we should be pushing for more. And we failed
mm,
epically in that regard for a variety of reasons. And I think a lot of that Conte bears responsibility for, like the way he handled certain players in that dressing room. I think it
mm,
was the wrong players to pick out. Like I sort of said to you in the back end, Christian Romero, I think Pop Matasar, he should have showed more faith in. Also, too, you look at maybe players like Eric Dyer that he put more faith in instead of maybe a Christian Romero, could have been a mistake. Could have maybe thought about as well, kind of, giving Richarlison more of a break, despite some of the injury troubles and everything he had. But I think Richarlison bears a bit of responsibility
mm,
there. Just, plenty of moments sort of in that season where Conte could have showed a bit more composure, or also as well could have just picked
mm,
out different players in the squad to put more faith in rather than the ones that he did. And the season could have
mm,
ended up a bit differently, if you ask me. So, but he bears some responsibility, I think, for the
mm,
following season. But these quotes for me really have more to do with just that run of his first season, that first season where he took
mm,
over. That's what these quotes to me actually are referring to. And if we're just looking at it
mm,
within that bubble of a window, I think these quotes for the most part are spot
mm,
on. And I don't really see it being that off character or that really, surprising, considering how Conte sees himself as, a winner and a guy that looks only for
mm.
material success and trophies.
I don't see a problem with it whatsoever. But look, you sort of hinted on the way the second season went and where it fell off. I think many people forget, and let's put a bit of context here to it. He got off to a very similar start the way Ange Postecoglou did this season. At one point, there was after the 10 games, there was a very similar comparison between, how Conte's got off to the start in that season and how Postecoglou got off the start in his season. Now, over the last 10 to 13 games, there has been a massive drop-off in performances and results under Postecoglou. But we're still in the mix. It was the same under Antonio Conte, but we were still in the mix for large parts of that season in the top 4 race eventually, until we completely fell off towards the end of the season when Conte lost the dressing room and results start turning. Then Newcastle and Man United were the beneficiaries of that and overtook us, but we were still in the mix come 26, 27 games for that top 4. And look, he didn't help himself in terms of the way he handled press conferences compared to the way Ange Postecoglou does. Postecoglou takes all the blame. Conte wanted to rid all the blame. He wanted to put the blame on the players and the club, which I have no problem with. I do think some of his quotes towards the end of the season, in the fashion that he left, sparked the club into action this summer to prove that to try and prove and dispel that he was wrong. But also, I don't think Postecoglou was helped by some of the players. Richarlison knew he needed surgery. Go and read some of his quotes, some of his interviews and stuff. He just said he delayed it because he wanted to go and play for Brazil in the World Cup. Wasn't the best decision on his behalf. He also had a lot of injuries to deal with, but where Postecoglou has been able to deal with them a little bit better, even when we've had injuries, he's still been able to use some of the best parts of Conte's squad, as his backup squad. Whereas Conte, he didn't have that. He had I would argue, a lot less of talent of a squad to sort of work with than what Postecoglou has, because of the signings that we made in the summer in key positions that we know we needed. But look, ultimately, he ended up losing the dressing room, and I think his biggest mistake was entrusting the likes of Lloris and Dyer and that with the core leadership group of that dressing room. If he had a different leadership group and he had the boss to change it like Postecoglou did, he might have seen a different fate at Tottenham Hotspur, because he might have got the reaction he was looking for with the way he, handled the press conferences, because that's his whole thing going into it, right? He's going in there, putting the club on blast, the players on blast, to try and stir a reaction. Now, we know with the likes of Dyer and Lloris, they were complacent. They'd achieve something one season, and the next season they'd completely drop off. That happened under Postecoglou. If he had the balls or under Conte, if he had the balls like Postecoglou and put a Richarlison, put a Romero, put a Sonny in that leadership group, he might have got a different reaction. And that's where I think Postecoglou has been very, very clever. And that's where I think Postecoglou is succeeding in coming out of this period where Conte didn't, because he had a weak leadership group. And he put them on blast before he left as well. So people can't say I'm wrong with that.
My last and final, I agree with a lot what you had to say there. My last and final point would just be where Conte really ended up sort of kind of getting himself sacked. Really was just a lot of things that he got wrong kind of off the pitch. Like you said there, kind of some of the leadership group that he ended up relying upon ended up, being the wrong guys to put his faith into. Some of the players, I think in general, when it came to his kind of consistency in playing, like maybe an Oliver Skip, for example, over Pop Matasar, I think ended up probably hurting him at the end of the day. Also, too, you look at some of the players that he ended up kind of, losing that relationship with. Whereas Ange Postecoglou kind of said, I think before, keeps more of a distant kind of relationship with his players, lets them kind of, almost deal with the dressing room themselves. He kind of ends up being that more of that, feared but also respected kind of manager, right? Where it's like a silent sort of kind of, fear, silent sort of respect that they seem to have for him. And also, but a love at the same time. And Conte didn't seem to find that, kind of a relationship with his players towards the end. It seemed like he had guys that were very loyal to him and were, willing to run through a wall for him. And then guys that wouldn't even be willing to like pick up a, piece of rubbish off the floor or something like that for him to throw away, right? Like it kind of ended up being that split where people wouldn't do anything for him, and then there were people that would do everything for him, and that's never really, a position you want to be in. Drives clicks, divisions in the squad. So for me, and also even the way that he, at certain press conferences where he could have just kept his cool, kind of just went about it, and just said nothing. He instead would say something, and he would allude to maybe his future, not being certain, or Daniel Levy not investing in the certain areas. And it just always allowed journalists to feast on us and kind of feast on kind of the drama around Spurs. So for me, Conte just got it wrong off the pitch for the most part. That's what ended up, I think, doing him over.
One of the biggest parts was, towards the end, he didn't have any schedule towards it. He'd say to the players, oh, by the way, you're not in tomorrow, come in tomorrow afternoon, or stuff like that, chopping and changing training and stuff when there's no schedule. you know, players start to get hurt, they start to get annoyed. You know what their modern day players are like? They're like robots. They like their routine. So that probably, you know, screwed them up in the end. Whereas Postecoglou has a schedule to it and has a pretty good grip on the schedule. You know, that's one thing that he put in place behind the scenes, schedules for everybody, because he knew how disheveled it was by the time Conte left here. But also one of the biggest differences, Conte put the pressure and the scrutiny on the club all the time. All the outside attention was put on the club by Conte. Postecoglou pushes that away, and I think that's the biggest difference. And look, to end off on, I really don't miss the divisiveness of the Conte era. You know, as much as I don't label a lot of the criticism that other people do, you know, I like to bring a bit of balance and a bit of context to it and stuff like that. I didn't make him the be all and end all of Tottenham's problems. There were deeper problems that, you know, didn't help Conte. I just don't miss the divisiveness, the screaming and arguing at each other from different points of views, trying to make each other see the different points of views. I much prefer the harmony that Postecoglou has brought. I do prefer the football that Postecoglou has brought. It's more exciting. Well, and look, hopefully the way Postecoglou has handled things differently will hopefully get us over the line.
Great point to end off on there, Dave. Well, everybody, let us know what you thought of our takes, and let us know if you disagree with us, because I think this has been a very divisive quote and very divisive, you know, takes that I've seen all about, especially sort of on the Twitter sphere. Smash that like button for us, please. Grab membership if you want to support the channel, and we will be seeing you very soon this upcoming weekend for the upcoming match. But everybody,
check out. Just quickly, check out the channel predictions coming out tomorrow, along with the predicted lineup as well. Fan show tomorrow evening, heading into the match day. So be there or be square.
See you, everybody. Have a good one. Come on, you Spurs. In the big Ange we trust. We never stop. Everywhere we go.